All right, so this is the third and final episode, edition, installment, whatever you want to call it, of our Angel. Ooh, I messed that up too. Of our Indian Lake trilogy deep dive series. So far we've done deep dives for My Heart is a Chainsaw and Don't Fear the Reaper. We are here now talking on the eve of the release of The Angel of Indian Lake, about The Angel of Indian Lake. So what I want to start out by saying is, for anybody who has yet to read this book, we're spoiling this book. So I know it's just at release time. So just be careful. If you want the story spoiled, feel free to listen. But like, if you haven't had an opportunity to read this book yet, we're going, nothing is off limits. So just be very, very prepared. There's going to be some conversation about some stuff before we get to the actual story. So I will do a reminder when we actually jump into talking about the book. I'll do as much of an emphatic reminder as I can that we are spoiling this story, because it's I wouldn't want it spoiled for me, I guess is the way that I would say it. So joining me again for the third time, Jesse Lawrence and Greg Green. Thank you both for coming back for the whole thing. Invaluable knowledge and understanding of not just this trilogy, but all things Stephen Graham Jones. So thank you both for joining me.
Yeah, totally. It's great to be back, and I've so enjoyed chatting with you both, because I know you both are very passionate about the stories of Stephen Graham Jones, as I am, and there's so much to get out of, especially these long form stories, these novels. As I'm sure we'll get into, there's multiple layers of things going on within the narrative. It's good to kind of dissect it and pick up things that I'm sure I will have missed in my my two reads of it. I definitely have picked up a lot more in the second read, since a whole kind of theme or movement that's going on that I wasn't aware of first time I read it. So it's a blast to talk with you guys.
I will point out that we are all wearing our Jade Daniels is My Final Girl gear for this final recording. And Greg, you have the red on the inside hoodie,
Yes,
which is, you had recently expanded. It used to be t-shirts, I think, exclusively, and now you've expanded the line to be other things as well. So there's never a wrong time to get your Jade merch. Is definitely
right.
what I'm thinking.
Absolutely. And these hoodies, I've got hoodies, crop top hoodies by popular demand, and a sweatshirt as well. Now, like one of Stephen's fans who's in a Stephen Graham Jones book club said, "I'd love a crop top hoodie," and I looked it up, and sure enough, I could get it from my shirt vendor. And I thought it would end up looking good. So I've got some of those out as well. They are brand new. Supplies are limited. Go out to jadeshirt.com to get your official, the one and only authentic official, blessed by Stephen himself, Jade Daniels wearables.
Yep. I made my order last night for that exact garment that you're
Yep,
wearing.
I shipped it. And I tell you what, Stephen got his today, and he posted a picture of him in this hoodie. And there's just not a whole lot more thrilling than seeing him wearing this and sharing it on social. So I'm just so thankful that he's allowed me to kind of participate in just helping make the reading experience a little richer and a little bit more fun. That's really what this is about. But I'll tell you, like, people are kind of finding each other. I'm hearing stories about people finding other Stephen Graham Jones fans through wearing these shirts, and that's the kind of thing, like, the advocating fan community ought to be about, is helping to lift up and proliferate artists that they love. So it's been a blast.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And from the moment I saw the design of this shirt, I was like, and I want you to know, and this isn't just me like, blowing smoke or anything. You can tell. So my laundry day is Thursdays. That's I do my laundry every Thursday. So Friday, I'm wearing this shirt. Friday
Nice.
is always, this is my first. It's like the first in the rotation kind of shirt.
Nice.
So, but I did my laundry over the weekend and saved it for this recording. So
awesome. Great. Well, I'm honored that you guys are wearing them. That makes me so happy.
And I'm assuming Jesse doesn't just have one shirt. I'm sure you have more than one.
A couple.
I fucking knew it. That's the thing about it. See, I've known Jesse for 12 years now. So yeah, we pick up on each other's things a little bit. All right.
Awesome.
Before we jump into talking about the actual story, I thought there would be a couple of different topics that would be interesting to go over. And I don't want to hesitate on talking about what I think is really exciting. I was emailing back and forth with Stephen about arcs for the Angel of Indian Lake so we could have this conversation. And the timing of it was he had just had some news about the audiobook, and he's like, oh man, there's something that's really exciting about the audiobook. You're really going to love it.
Yep.
But he didn't give me any details. And so I was like, oh man, I'm very excited, because if Jones is excited, this is going to be something good. And he recently announced that Stephen King is going to be a voice of one of the characters in The Angel of Indian Lake. So how exciting is that?
Yeah, that's amazing. And you talk about literary lineage, especially within the horror genre. And it's like Poe and H.P. Lovecraft and his generation, and jump forward some. You got some Robert Bloch and Richard Matheson, and then you're Stephen King, Clive Barker, and that leads us up to today. And I think Stephen Graham Jones is going to be one of those people that we're still reading like generations from now, along with Stephen King. So having both of them together on an audiobook that includes Barbara Crampton, I got to point out. I mean, like, I'm a huge fan of Barbara, and she's such a delightful lady. And then bringing Isabelle LeBlanc back to do kind of that Jade voice specifically. She's great in Don't Fear the Reaper, in that full cast production there. And of course, she was also the narrator for The Babysitter Lives. So I'm so good. Can't wait. I'm going to have it on audible.com tomorrow, and I'll probably do a third read immediately. So I'm really stoked about that.
Yeah. Is there any indication what character he's inhabiting in this, or we don't know?
Well, I mean, he's an older gentleman, so he's probably going to be, playing a character or reading a section that will be appropriate to that.
Mr. Holmes.
Mr. Holmes would make sense.
Yeah.
And there's of course, well, hold on a second. Wait, Jesse, Mr. Holmes died like 2 books ago. How can he be in this, right?
You could read the letter that was unearthed from Holmes to Kimmy Daniels.
Yeah. That's right. So there is that section. It's a nice
and
short.
That didn't make me cry, not at all.
Oh my God.
That it's a powerful, short little piece of the book, but it is powerful.
Yeah.
I don't know what other characters that would make sense for him to kind of play, or sections that he would play, unless he did like all of the investigative Baker solutions, Baker reports, as I call it. I guess he could do that, except as we find out, who's doing the research for those investigations is not a man at all. So I think they're going to have a woman play that. That would be my guess. I don't have any knowledge on that.
You'll have to tell us tomorrow.
Yeah. I'm very curious about Barbara. Maybe Barbara will be reading those sections. That would kind of make sense to me. But there's other parts. Maybe the sections that are about that are a little more about Jocelyn Cates. I could see her playing that, like that final girl from the previous generation kind of role. But yeah, I'm so excited just for the full cast recording, because of the one they did for Don't Fear the Reaper was so smartly conceived and constructed, where it's not like they're trying to do a radio play of it. They're giving sections of it to different actors, where that segment is primarily from the perspective of one of the many characters in the story. And they may be doing the voices for other characters besides themselves. So yeah, Hardy is talking to Jade, and the Hardy actor will do some of Jade's lines, but primarily it's Hardy's lines. So emotionally, that actor is carrying the section that belongs to the heart of that character. Man, I thought it was not just smartly conceived. The actors really pulled it off. So I cannot wait to get a listen to this, especially with Barbara. And then Stephen King and Stephen Graham Jones, of course, he's been doing the acknowledgments of all these books. I assume that's all he's doing, but who knows? Maybe he's doing something else in there. We'll see about that.
Well, so what this Stephen King thing brings to mind is what me and Jesse did an episode of my podcast where with Stephen where we talked about demon theory. And I asked a question where I said, I basically was asking if the DNA of demon theory was in all of his like subsequent work. But the way I said it was like, is it in all of your work? And he jokingly replied that it sounded like I had said, is it capital I it in all of his work? And he's like, and absolutely it is. So, to have like someone who's like, you know, literary idol of yours, I'm sure.
Oh, he's Uncle Steve.
Participate.
Yeah, he's Uncle Steve. All of us, you know, like not just to the writers, but to the readers. Like, who has not seen one of the movies for ill or otherwise? You know, some of them are awesome, some of them are a little rough. But who's not seen something by Stephen King or read something by Stephen King? His outreach is just people compare him to Charles Dickens, and that actually fits.
So congratulations, Stephen, on getting Stephen to be part of your book and all of the other amazing people who are contributing. I thought that was really cool, and I want to acknowledge that like off the bat because that was news that came out not long before we were teed up to do this recording. So that's pretty fresh news.
Yep.
Another topic, like in the past deep dives, we've talked a little bit about the greater universe of Stephen Graham Jones. With our little like trophies and cool stuff and, you know, some other things. But I thought maybe we could mention for people who are newer to Stephen Graham Jones, is there something that you've read or you can think of that is something that people, because like, here's what when I see people talking like enthusiastically about Stephen Graham Jones, they've read Mongrels, Hard as a Chainsaw, Don't Fear the Reaper, Night of the Mannequins, Mapping the Interior, and that's it. There's a universe of stuff out there, and there's definitely a lot of stuff that's available that people maybe just don't know to look for. So I was thinking maybe you guys, the three of us, could all give kind of recommendations of stuff that might be lesser known, but still just excellent examples of Stephen stuff. And I'm going to start with Jesse.
Well, I mean, I think everyone needs to read The Least of My Scars. That book is just so dear to me. It's kind of basically seeped into the marrow a bit there. So that's always, you know, I'm like, read that book. That's the book.
It's traumatic. I mean, it's the most disturbing, distressing book I've ever read. And people talk about it like online, even though you're reading it, you can kind of hear the hushed tones of their voice. In you know, it's just like it is so terribly disturbing.
And you can always tell. Like I was Sadie Hartman. I don't know if I was talking. I think I was talking to her when I had her on the podcast, and we're talking about Stephen Graham Jones or something. But the conversation ended up being she alluded to a story that was like the most fucked up story she'd ever read, however she said it. And I said, "Oh, so you read Least of My Scars?" And she's like, "Yeah." So you can just, you know that's what it is. But not only is it like
the alternative is Solve for X, and she's read that and been very deeply disturbed by that one as well. Those two stories get under people's skin like nothing else.
Yeah, but I agree with Jesse. That book, it's unparalleled. Like it is such a incredible short piece of work. It's like probably right around 200 pages, maybe if that. But fantastic, and the cover art.
Yeah,
everything about
183 pages of pure chaos.
Oh, so
I mean,
good.
it's the protagonist is a serial killer / I don't want to go any further into it than that. Just know it's deeply disturbing. How does Stephen get into this guy's mind? I think he's just Stephen's mining and pillaging his nightmares, especially.
That's totally
He's especially like, as a dad. Not exclusively as that, but I think I think he just ran rampant in the fields of his own nightmares to create that character. It's so disturbing, and it's so brilliant at the same time.
Jesse, did you have other suggestions or?
I'm always thinking about this one short story of his. The problem is I can't recall off the top of my head if it actually exists in a link anywhere still. So like, I feel bad if I'm recommending something that people can no longer access, but his story, Boys with Guitars, is always, I've always loved that story so much. And it's not horror. It really is more just a relationship story. And it is so, so beautiful. And it's just one of those stories where I kind of, and it has that vibe to it where I'm like, I kind of feel like I lived in that space at one point in my life. It's a wonderful story.
I have not read that one yet, but I do know you can get it in The Faster, Redder Road, which is, let me see. I've got
excellent. It's in there. Yeah, it was part of this five or six story online magazine thing where Stephen Graham Jones had a special episode, which included some graphic novel work too, where he was doing the writing, and a friend of ours, actually from days past, Bowden Steiner, was illustrating the story. So that was kind of this online magazine special issue.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then Theodore Van Alst Jr. Put together a kind of greatest hits at that time. It's a sampler of mostly short stories and then some excerpts from a couple of novels, and put it into The Faster, Redder Road. And there's some stuff that you really will not find anywhere else anymore, because it was published online originally, or it was in some journal that you're just probably not going to be able to find. So that is an excellent resource, and it is, at least last I checked, in print from the University of New Mexico Press, I believe. It is. Yeah, Dean, if you need to find you can find it, I'm pretty sure, on Amazon. Order it through your local independent bookstore, etc. The Faster, Redder Road.
All right, Greg, what you got for us?
Well, I got a couple of things. First of all, this. I think everyone knows that he is a comic book writer now. The True Believers issue 1 that he co-wrote with Josh.
Jesse's got the mask.
Oh no, Killer TM has entered the room. Joshua Viola with Hex Publishers co-wrote it and published it. Of course, Earth Divers has been quite successful as well. So he's a comic book author. Now here's one I just love. It's a story in Wrong Tree Review. I think this is issue 1, the Wrong Tree Review. Yeah, volume 1, issue 1. It's called The Lazarus Complex. You can get a copy. This is available print on demand. Again, DM me if you want to find this copy. But I think you could probably go out just online, search for Wrong Tree Review issue 1, volume 1, issue 1. The story, The Lazarus Complex, is one of the most frightening concepts I have ever read. It is kind of a sci-fi story, sci-fi-based horror. I don't want to say anything else about it. It's kind of a police procedural, kind of a prison story, definitely in the future. And it's just got this idea that I personally find terrifying. It is a lesser known story that absolutely a Stephen Graham Jones fan would go get it, scare yourself silly. The Babysitter Lives is an audio only novel. It's a whole novel. It's a haunted house novel that is really disturbing and frightening. And The Babysitter Lives, narrated by Isabelle LeBlanc, who we saw in True Detective Night Country, did a fantastic job in that. And anyway, it's only available as an audiobook for the time being. I hope it'll get printed someday, but you can find the CD. If you got, like me, you got to have all the Stephen Graham Jones you can in physical media. That is available in CD. And then last thing I'll mention, just kind of an oddity, is a book called Galaga by Michael Kimball. It is a bunch of short meditations on the video game Galaga. And Stephen's a big fan of Galaga, and Michael reached out to him and asked him to give some thoughts on life lessons learned from Galaga. And he actually put in several good life lessons that he learned from Galaga. So that is a nice little piece there from Stephen. So yeah, Stephen, it's, Galaga has a number of stages to it. Well, and so the chapters are all stage whatever. So Stephen has stage 225. Michael says, the writer and my friend Stephen Graham Jones wrote this list of life lessons that Galaga teaches. Number 1, the beginning stages are easy. Number 2, remember where the center is during challenging times. Totally, yes. Number 3, catch problems when the stage begins and they won't catch you later. And number 4, your enemy can be your friend, your savior, etc. He's got 15 life lessons from Gallagher. I think you can find this out, do a search on Amazon. You'll probably find the publisher.
Very cool.
So many interesting odds and ends out there.
I want to point out to readers that don't sleep on individually released short stories, because there's some really good stuff out there. The 2 that come to mind are The Attack of the 50-Foot Indian, which I thought was really cool, which came out several years ago. I think you can still just get it on Kindle, maybe some other formats I'm not sure of. And Night Cyclist.
I don't think it's in print. I think it's like an Amazon original story, Kindle only, I think.
I believe so. And then The Night Cyclist, I think, is kind of a similar situation where it was released digital only.
It's on Tor.com, I believe. I think they bought it.
Oh, is it?
I think it's like kind of a Tor original or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's in print either yet.
Huh. Well, no, I didn't think it was ever intended to be like a printed book, but that story was really cool. Like, if I remember correctly, because it's been a long time, it has to do with this person who goes cycling at night and encountering like a vampire kind of presence or something like that. What I'm getting at is, like, if you go to the Barnes & Noble, there's going to be the 5 books that everybody knows about. If you do a little digging, there's so much really good stuff that is available beyond those things that are really, really good too. So, like, once you hit that wall of like, oh, I've read the stuff I can get at Barnes & Noble, keep looking, because there's a lot of really cool stuff out there.
Another good one, 3 Miles Past, is 3 novellas. This also is like Least of My Scars is maybe not as well known, but there are 3 novellas in here. One is like The Least of My Scars, really intense, hard to read. It's really, really violent and horrifying. There's another one in here that's got some very kind of very strange paranormal things going on that I really, really enjoyed a lot. There's good stuff in that one too.
Yep. So kind of obvious, we like our Stephen Graham Jones. And I would just encourage people to, ask the enthusiasts, say, hey, what should I read next, or whatever, or share the stuff that you've really enjoyed that maybe other people don't know about.
Absolutely.
Build that community. So
yes,
we're going to jump into talking about the actual book soon, but I thought that let's try and be as brief as possible with just a quick recap of My Heart is a Chainsaw and Don't Fear the Reaper. Before we dive into this book, because like a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about kind of touches on things that happened in the previous books. Kind of, obviously, that's kind of, oh, by the way, everybody, this is coming out in July. I was a teenage slasher. So no better time to start pre-ordering than now.
Pre-order now. Comes out July 16, if memory serves. And I think it's going to be a big splash.
The people I know of, I've seen online who started reading it are having pretty good reactions so far. So
yes.
Okay. How do you briefly recap Heart is a Chainsaw and Don't Fear the Reaper? So I'm going to do my best to tackle My Heart is a Chainsaw, and then we'll see how that goes, and we'll go from there. But we want to keep
maybe
it brief.
Jesse and we can both audition for the Don't Fear the Reaper recap, and we'll see. Hey,
succinct is not really my thing.
don't fear the recap,
nor is memory.
Yeah. So My Heart is a Chainsaw introduces us to Jay Daniels and the town of Proof Rock, and the whole world, the universe, that, I guess universe is kind of a big word, but that is built for this trilogy. Jade is a outcast. She's a very kind of angry teenager who is obsessed with slasher films and is dealing with a lot of trauma, and kind of uses her enthusiasm for slasher films as like a way to, like, as armor almost, in a way. And as the story goes on, she starts to get the feeling that, oh, there's things that are happening in my town that like suggest that there's a slasher here, and decides that it's kind of on her as the only one who knows enough about this kind of thing to warn the town, to get everybody prepared to fight what's about to come. And then from there, there's so many cool things that are built in with lore from the town's past. There's the camp called Camp Blood and everything that happened there. There's Terra Nova, where these rich people come over and they cut out a piece of a national forest so that they can use it for themselves in a very selfish way that's very colonizer-ish. There's the whole like lore of this lake that exists in the town because a dam was built and it flooded an original town where there was this real evil priest that caused a lot of bad things to happen. So there's so many things going on in this story, but it all focuses around Jade, and Jade wanting to do what she can to warn the town so that everybody can, survive this slasher event that she sees coming. And I didn't even mention the actual killer, which is, the big thing, Stacey Graves, who was this poor little girl who was separated. Her mom was murdered. She was orphaned and, kind of an outcast on her own, and had a tragic...
Town did not treat her well.
Yeah, and she was bullied.
They should have done something to care for her, but she was, there's I think some hint that Stacey Graves being, part Indian, left her as maybe even more of an outcast, and she was, lived kind of like a feral cat, essentially.
Yeah.
And that ended up being such a deep shame from Jade's perspective, and I think from the perspective of anybody now looking at that, saying, why didn't someone just take the poor little girl in? Yeah. But that comes back. That lack of compassion on a lost child comes back to haunt the town, literally to haunt them, as over the generations. There's like sightings of this little girl, the Lake Witch, Stacey Graves. And eventually some real chaos and violence that comes about by it. But there are sightings during My Heart is a Chainsaw that people, people are kind of assuming that there's a killer running around. Maybe it's Jade Daniels or whatever. And she's dressing up like this well-known, monster character that the parents, the local parents have been telling their kids about for a couple of generations. It's probably just someone dressing up as her. But in fact, no, like they're really like this girl really is around, and this, she was, cast out, mistreated, eventually died. And, yet she has not gone away.
Yep. And so, all of this culminates with, Jade having to kind of face her demons in the form of her abusive father, who dies at the end of the book. She also, the whole time, is saying she's not the final girl, but basically fills the role of the final girl by taking down the bad guy, ostensibly, kind of almost twice, like 1.5 times in the book.
Yeah. And her struggle in the first book is that she can't be the final girl. Yeah. She can be the witness to the final girl. She can maybe be some source of information to the young woman she thinks is the final girl, Letha Mondragon, but she herself can't be, because she's not white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, beautiful, smart, virtuous, pure. She just doesn't see herself as there's not a possibility for her. And of course, what we see in the first book especially is, no, like being a final girl is, those are outmoded ideas. Being a final girl is a lot more than, whether you're, sexually pure or not, that sort of thing.
For the sake of brevity, we're going to move on to because we spent 2 hours talking about it, so boiling it down into 2 minutes is a little bit of a challenge. Jumping on to Don't Fear the Reaper, it's 4 years later. Jade has been incarcerated for some damage to public property, although she avoided being prosecuted for killing her father, which it appears on a video that she had done by hitting him with a machete. So she's back in town, and it coincides with a serial killer named Dark Mill South, who is part of, the agreement with the courts and everything. He said he would show them where he had left some bodies, and so they're taking him to the place to show the bodies, and it's Proof Rock's on the way. There's a freak storm, things happen. Now Dark Mill South is in town. Whole town's locked down because of this crazy blizzard. And people start getting killed, and they're getting killed mostly in the form of in the methods that were used in different horror movies. So this book kind of zooms out, and we see things from perspective of others than Jade. So we get to know the town better. But yeah, the killers in this one turn out to be Dark Mill South is killing some people, but Cinnamon Baker, who was from the first book, dealing with all the trauma and what she feels like she needs to be, avenge from her experience in the first book, is doing a heavy lifting in the killing department too. You guys can add to that if you want to.
Yeah, no, she maybe killed a little more.
Yeah. A little bit more.
Yeah. She I think ended up killing more people than Dark Mill South did, at least in terms of the scope of this novel, just during the 72 hours or something like that in which this novel takes place. 36 hours or something. It's like super short timeline.
Yep. And so I think that the change for Jade in the second book is she comes back. She's trying to be a new person who's not that the kid that's obsessed with slashers and stuff, and doesn't want this to happen. Like in the first book, she thought, "Oh, this is what I've been waiting for," and then after everything was over, realized the toll that something like that takes on everybody, and so she's like, gotten to the point where she's like, I don't want to have anything to do with this shit, but can't, like, she gets pulled back in. Like, there's nothing she can do. She needs to help people. Like, she's got this drive in her to help people, even if like she has no interest in helping people, which I think is pretty cool. And so, yeah, instead of dealing with her demons of her past and being abused and her horrible father and parental situation in general, it kind of evolved into, something different this time. Anything else you want to add, or we want to actually start talking about Angel of Indian Lake?
Yeah, I think we can move on to Angel.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right. So do you guys want to, because I want to do that rules from a trilogy kind of thing, but do you guys want to start off by talking about like how the book kicks off and everything? Where do you guys think makes the most sense to get started with this conversation?
Let's start with that first chapter. And when you mentioned to Jesse and me earlier, you wanted to talk about on this podcast, like how do the slasher rules work within the third installment of the franchise, The Angel of Indian Lake. So I kind of watched for references to the rules and things. And I'll tell you, in the very first chapter, which is kind of it's a cold open, as they say in the film and TV world. We have three characters that we probably don't know from previous books. Maybe there was a last name, like a sibling or whatever in a previous book, but these high school kids, young man, young woman who've had some romantic relationship in the past and have broken up over and over again and gotten back together. Hetty and Paul, and then Hetty's little brother Jansen. And they are trying to make a film that Hetty thinks is going to be her ticket out of Proof Rock, about the savage history of Proof Rock, Idaho. So they're making this little film, and Jan is kind of what looks like this kind of ghostly little boy on a swing set. And then they want to shoot some footage in a local cemetery. They go out at night in a cemetery, pretty bad idea, right? But they note that, hey, they're respecting the cemetery, so nothing bad should happen to them. They've watched their spooky movies as well. They're following the rules, and yet things do not go very well for them at all. And I think, at least to me, that's an indicator that the rules may not apply in this novel. Definitely the gloves are off. But these two kids, these two young people get killed, Jan disappears. We don't know where he goes. And one of their other friends, Wainbow, they find him dead out there around the cemetery, not too far from the cemetery as well. So, is it going to follow the rules or not? They were not disrespecting the cemetery, and yet they all died. So that may be something of an indicator of how the rest of the story is going to go. But it's interesting to see that there are references throughout this, not as maybe upfront as much as in My Heart is a Chainsaw, where she's really, like, as part of Jade's dialogue, she keeps bringing up references over and over to various slasher films, and you get a whole lot of slasher Q in that first book. It's not quite as blunt and on the surface as in My Heart is a Chainsaw. But yeah, you definitely see moments where they're trying to figure out, like Jade and Letha, Banner and other Jocelyn Cates and other people are trying to figure out, like, based on their knowledge of slasher films, what is likely to have occurred or is likely to occur in the next couple of hours.
Yep.
And there is also a reference to the rules in as explicated in Scream 3 for what happens in the third installment of the franchise. Who I can't recall the name of the character in Scream who gives the rules.
Randy.
Randy, that's it. Thank you. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So that was referenced. So when I was like, oh, I'd like to do this because this is the third in an installment, I knew I wasn't having an original idea because it was mentioned in the book. Yeah. But yeah, I thought it'd be cool to look at that. One thing I want to point out too, that just kind of occurred to me, is that because the female character was recording, her documentary thing for class, this book starts out almost like a found footage horror movie too, because like it's these people who are out doing this thing, exploring this, whatever legend or whatever, talking about this legend, and then, dying because of it. So there's a little bit of a found footage kind of feel to it as well, because that footage does come back later on.
The full circle of the first book, because we had the phone footage from before.
Oh yeah.
But that was just two tourists doing, touristy young people things out in the middle of the night. Whereas this one, the footage is, well, we've lived through a history in this town already. So now that's what the footage is there. But it just kind of brings it back full circle too, to
That's
have
a good
the
point.
footage in each one.
That is a really good point. I had not thought of that. But that reminds me of one of the, Greg, you mentioned, I think, callbacks to earlier stories and stuff like that. The one that just plagues me is talking about putting your phone in a plastic bag, like a sandwich bag, and then it smelling like peanut butter. I believe that comes up in every book, if I'm not mistaken. I think it came up.
Definitely does in Angel as well.
Yeah,
I don't
2 times.
From Reaper. Wow.
Yeah, 2 times in Angel, and you're like, I don't recall if it's in Don't Fear the Reaper or not, but like calling back such a innocuous thing, I thought was really cool. And it's like a little bit of a treat for the people who like either pay attention or something, because that was established in the first chapter of My Heart is a Chainsaw.
Yeah,
with the tourist kids.
That's right. And then, it's just one of these elements of, verisimilitude. It's just like, I totally smell that peanut butter smell in an empty Ziploc bag. And yeah, I can totally see how if I put my cell phone in there, it's going to come out smelling like peanut butter. It's just one of those weird. And Stephen has a lot of. He uses food a good bit. Food and the sensation around food, the smell, the taste, and whatever, and the fear of corruption in food, which is something I know that he's stated that he's a little squeamish, wanting to know, like, where has his food come from. I wonder if that's why he eats at Chipotle all the time. At least it's like some kind of controlled supply chain, and you kind of know what you're getting. So yeah. But I think he loves food, but he wants to know where it came from.
I mean, that brings us a lot of, because, eating, like, what is that number? They say it's 90 something or whatever % of taste is smell. And smell is the strongest memory that humans have. So it just very quickly can transport us to a time and a place. And I think just as we grow up as people, we have a lot of food and happy memory associations, particularly from the childhood years and whatnot. This just always makes me think of it came from Del Rio, the tomatillo salsa, that she would just, man, she's like, I would kill for like a thermos of that. And like, that would just carry me through this whole damn thing if I just had, that thermos of salsa type thing. So yeah, I think it's just a really strong human thing.
Yes.
That's a good point.
We could relate it to bears too, though, I guess. I mean, animals have way more smell going on than we do.
Wait, yeah, bears. We'll get to bears for sure. Oh my God, the bears. But you make a good point, and those types of things, when you can do a shortcut into like a shared kind of like cultural knowledge or experience or whatever, that's a great way to dig right into, get someone into the story. Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
I said that poorly, but
and Hetty's right. I mean, filming that video the way she was doing, going back and doing reshoots would have been a major pain.
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit of a challenge. But then, so the book is established, so it follows the kind of tradition of the initial part of the story is like that initial kill, the first blood, whatever you want to call it, that kicks off this story, but also gives us an idea about what the killer is, possibly. And in this case, it seems like it's something supernatural, and crazy powerful. And what I will say is that, I feel like the Angel of Indian Lake really ramped up the like severity of kills, or like just the like shock value of kills. Maybe
you think what on earth could top like Independence Day Massacre? People being slaughtered by the lake witch. Like, what could top that scene? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there's one in this one. Down on the around the creek, down in front of the dam. It's pretty insane. It's pretty intense. And like no one's safe in that scenario.
Yep. Yeah. So, but then I want to point out that in this book, if I'm not mistaken, with the exception of there are some reports, like almost like a private investigation firm is doing these regular reports on Jade for someone who will try and figure out who that is in our discussion. The rest of the book, I believe, is all from Jade first person perspective. Am I right about that?
After chapter 1. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. So we went from the first book was from Jade's perspective to the second book was multiple perspectives and really kind of zoomed out. And then this book is back to being first person from Jade's perspective, except for that opening scene, which is the same as My Heart is a Chainsaw.
If anything, I'd say it's even closer. It's like right at her elbow in the Indian Lake. The very last chapter is written almost like it's an objective viewpoint looking at this woman who's Jade, but she's not even really named in there. She's referred to as the woman who was the final girl, the woman who was an aunt, the woman who is whatever. Right. So it's kind of taking this like narrative separation away from her, but it's still very much what happens to her and her part of the story at the very end of the book.
That's true. Yep. Were you going to say something, Jesse?
I was just thinking it's kind of cinematic too, the way it's all structured with the point of view, because first installment, Jade's point of view, last installment, Jade's point of view. That's kind of how the film might follow protagonists too. In the middle act, which is the bigger act, that's where you're going to get the subplots and the multiple point of views and the cross-cutting action and just all this other stuff too. So it's kind of like shifting focus within a movie as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Real good point. The other thing I want to acknowledge about, because we're talking about the beginning of the story, is that another chunk of years has gone by. So it's 3 to 4. And did you say 4, Jesse?
Right.
It's another
4. 4 years, yeah.
So now Jade...
And Jade went to prison to make sure Letha... Or Banner didn't go to prison for wrecking or lose his job or whatever for wrecking a truck. She ended up saying, hey, I was the one who did it. But it was wrecking like state property. So she ended up doing another stint in prison.
Yeah, because that violated her probation. So she basically, went back for another 4 years. And so like, I think I look at the trilogy from the first book to the second book. Jade coming back in the second book was like, I know what type of person I'm supposed to be, and that's the front I'm putting up and everything. She was trying to be, I'm a normal person. And in this book, the Jade that we meet at the beginning of the book is even more broken and even more fragile, and has all these kind of telltale behaviors of someone who has gone through like an incredible amount of trauma. Like throughout the book, you see her like hiding weapons in certain places, and her behavior is someone who feels like at any given moment death could happen. And so like where she was from book 1 to book 2, like you could see that she was trying to work through the trauma of everything. And in this book, she's even more damaged and fragile. But because of that, is trying to make an effort to work through these things, and even talking to a therapist, which is kind of a big change too.
It's actually, it's kind of, when you get into the second chapter titled Scary Movie, of course, the parody of Scream and other horror movies when that came out. It starts off sounding so dire, and then like she talks about feeling like she's in a body bag, like we see in Nightmare on Elm Street with I think it's Tina who's being dragged around a body bag, and she feels like she's in that body bag, can't breathe. She's like holding on to a wall to try to stay balanced, and it's like, like I've seen her fight a lake witch, I've seen her fight Dark Mill South, this unstoppable monster of a man, and what is she up against now? A room full of students, high schoolers. She's facing real life, and she is on anti-anxiety meds, and she's really struggling. And I think it sets up the question at the beginning: does she have the ability to kind of conform to adult life? Is she cut out for it or not? And she's struggling. She's just struggling to try to be normal, and she's not real good at being normal. And being responsible, but she's also in a position, we find out, where she's teaching history, just like Mr. Holmes, and Mr. Holmes is constantly there. In fact, I think she's speaking the whole book to Holmes, Hardy, her mom, and I think maybe like one other character she references in this. But she's it's almost it's like I guess it's kind of like her form of prayer, maybe. She's always saying all these things, and then she'll reach out to and say, and I was thinking of you, Mr. Holmes, and it isn't, whatever. She references him. So it's like she's talking to him the whole time. So there is a moment there, even at the beginning, when she's so shaky and she really needs a little bit of extra anxiety meds to get her through just this like 7th period history class. But she's also taking on the responsibility and the role of her mentor, the guy, like one of the few people who saw something in her, maybe the only person who saw something in her, was Mr. Holmes and Hardy, Sheriff Hardy. So it is a kind of a full circle moment, but it really does raise the question: is she cut out for this world or not?
Did it break her?
Yeah.
Well, so in that chapter, I was like, I read this line. It's not even a full line, but I was like, oh, Jones, you lovely man, this was so cool. Did you catch the line that was an adaptation of the format of the title of the first book? So My Heart is a Chainsaw is the title of the first book. In Scary Movie, toward the very beginning of the book, Jade says, "My anxiety is a straitjacket."
Oh, yeah, that's right. I hadn't.
And I was like, that's the format, and he can't have done that on accident. So I thought that was really cool. But it really does. Cool. She is introduced as very fragile, but also I think that shows early on she's trying to get through it and survive. So like kind of like the monster she's fighting right now is her instability and stuff.
Yeah.
Because,
and the principal going to see her flailing and fire her? Because like she's got to, do certain things to keep this job and try to fit back into real life, adult life, stay out of prison, not violate any terms of, probation or anything. And she's struggling, but I think she's handling it, and she's determined to teach these students the real history, not like Armitage coming in and Don't Fear the Reaper, and he's coming to teach history. He's not even from Idaho, and he doesn't really belong here, and he's only here to exploit the pain of a city, the pain of this town, this place, so he can write a book and get famous and rich off of that, or whatever he has in mind. Here, she is of this land, and so she is an appropriate person. She deserves to be one who's teaching history, unlike Armitage.
The other part of her story in the beginning of the book and throughout is that the stakes are different, I want to say. So whereas in the past, like, she really felt like she was fully alone and only had herself. And then, in the second book, like, she started to have like a best friend and stuff like that. In this book, she is very involved in Letha and why do I always forget his name? Banner Tompkins. And Banner's life with their kid. And it's obvious that Letha is doing everything she can to help support Jade, because Jade is her best friend and she cares so much about her. But the stakes are different now because there's a little kid that she can't let down. And there's her best friends that she wants to be there for. She wants to see them be happy. So now the stakes are different, because when it was just her, like, she even had that, attempt in the first book, like, where she's like, just wanted to end it all. But now she's got different kind of things that she cares about. So I think that's interesting how that plays into the book too.
Yeah. Yeah. Her adoration and devotion toward Adrian, Banner and Letha's little girl, shows. I can't recall Jade ever talking about wanting to be a mom herself, or that being like a realistically like part of her. Could that be part of her future or not? I don't remember talking about that. But her maternal feelings for this little girl, her desire to protect her, to give her something that, of course, Jade herself did not get from her own mom. And that's a lot of the subject of Don't Fear the Reaper. But she wants to be there, and she will move heaven and earth, storm the gates of hell to protect this little girl. I think her nickname is 80, or it's either Addie or 80. I think it's 80.
I think so.
For Adrian. But 80 means the world to her. And I think that's an important part of Jade's development. If she's anything like my daughter was when she was a teenager, the thought of like little kids or babies, I don't want to, she didn't really want to have anything to do with little children. And, maybe Jade may have been like that as well. But now she is completely devoted to this little girl, and that maternal instinct that she has, like the mama bear we see in My Heart Is a Chainsaw at the very end, is coming out. And I think that's an important part of her transformation in the Angel of Indian Lake. I mean, that is like the primary question that we get from the very start of this book. As soon as you pick it up off the shelf, before you even turn to page 1, there's this question. Well, who is the Angel of Indian Lake?
Yep.
And there are questions, like there are several possibilities as who is this mysterious figure who we see in chapter 1, and there are references to her throughout the book. It's some looks like a female figure in a torn up pale dress with long black hair. Well, could that be? Is it the Lake Witch come back from the waters, maybe grown up some? Is it maybe? Is it maybe Sally? I'm gonna get the name wrong. Sally, the woman who Chalembert, Tallenberg,
who took
who
down
was the
Dark
woman
Mill
who
South.
first took on Dark Mill South, who has escaped from the behavioral health facility in which she was being kept. We know she's escaped. Is that the Angel of Indian Lake who's been seen lately? Or maybe it's Jan Jansen, the little boy who's got kind of a big mop of a dark hair and has disappeared. Maybe it's Jan Jansen that they've been seeing, etc. But who? Or or is it Stacey Graves risen back from the dark waters? Who is that figure? Or is it maybe it's Jade running around in some kind of disguise or something? But it asks that question of who is the Angel of Indian Lake, and I think we see along the way Jade becoming the answer to that. But it takes some bit of a transformation for her.
Yeah. So we all right. There's so many things. There's so many ways we could go, because I want to talk about the Baker reports and stuff like that. I want to talk about some of the early kills and everything. But I really want to do the 3 bullet points of the Scream rules, just to like kind of mix it up a little bit and see how does this book address those rules. So Randy in Scream 3 shares the rules for how it's going to go in this type of story. And the first one is you've got a killer who's going to be superhuman. Stabbing him won't work. Shooting him won't work, basically. And the third one, you've got to cryogenically freeze his head, decapitate him, or blow him up. I feel like Jones definitely came through with that promise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've got that in the figure of the undead Tab Daniels, who comes up out of the lake, which is a great return of a character who kind of got his comeuppance in My Heart is a Chainsaw, but really considering what he did to his own daughter, it wasn't nearly enough. So we bring him back, and he gets shot in the chest. Doesn't stop him. He's kind of a putrescent flesh Terminator is what he ends up being in this book. So you've got definitely superhuman. Stabbing him won't work. Shooting him won't work. Decapitate him. He's almost already decapitated because he had that machete in Chainsaw go in My Heart is a Chainsaw go into his neck. Almost took his head off. There's a moment where his head kind of dips back, and the back of the brim of his hat touches his back. Jade sees him. He describes it as being like a Pez dispenser head.
Yeah,
and then pulls his head back on. So his head's almost decapitated, and that's not doing it. So they, you definitely have that showing up here in the third installment.
Yep, and that jumps us a little bit forward, but like the explanation for that is, so we talked about it a little in the last. Is it okay if we talk about the corrupting effect of the lake and all that kind of stuff? I think this is an okay time to talk about that, even though it's not. I don't care if we talk about everything in exact chronological order of the book. We talked a little bit about the corrupting power of Ezekiel in our deep dive of Don't Fear the Reaper. In this one, some rich people have built this kind of temporary floating island with a bunch of equipment that they're trying to like map the town at the bottom of the lake and do some stuff. And it's like, because you want to recreate it where Camp of Blood is. And if I remember correctly,
turn it into a tourist destination, essentially.
Right.
This is what people used to be. This is how life used to be 100 years ago when this was, Henderson Golding, and how people used to dress and what they would used to do. And of course, they'll bring over people from Proof Rock to go and basically cosplay their ancestors 3 generations back.
So first of all, like that's the rich people elevated to a new degree of disgusting in this one from My Heart is a Chainsaw. If you ask me, like at least the people in My Heart is a Chainsaw could lie to themselves about like their intentions, whereas these people are just very obviously it's a money grab. It's exploiting a situation, that kind of thing. So there's this like temporary island in the lake. We have all this equipment, and Jade, for all of the different reasons, wants to sabotage it. And so she's like throwing their equipment into the lake. What she doesn't realize is that what it's doing is starting to collapse the structures of that initial town, including the church. And as it turns out, the more of the kind of unholy whatever it is that's in the church that can get out into the lake, the worse its influence on what's in or near the lake is going to be. And so, whereas it was kind of a contained, controlled evil for a while, now like the cat's out of the bag, and victims from previous books like the Independence Day Massacre and just townspeople from that original thing are starting to animate and try to come out, and that's how Tab Daniels comes up. So
Ezekiel's choir down in Drown Town, he has, at least according to legend, and it turns out legend is actually really quite accurate here. Just kind of the folk tales that have spun up over the last 3-4 generations. He's down there leading the choir down in the church where they stayed and locked the doors while that whole valley area is being inundated as the dam was built and it's filling up. Well, they're not going to leave, and they stay down there and drown, and they die down there, but they're still somehow animated or alive or something. And that singing from the choir is doing weird magical, dark miracle, bad miracle kinds of things down there. And so the last thing that Jade, in her her tempestuous nature, throws a bunch of stuff off of Treasure Island, as they call it, including a heavy flashlight, and it breaks a hole in the roof. And that's what's letting the sound come out. And in fact, some people appear to be able to hear the singing down there coming. If you dip your head under the water, some people seem to be able to hear it. And like you said, now they're able to hear it a little bit louder. And it's messing, like people who've been floating dead down there for a long time, down in the cold, where maybe like the rapidity of decay is slowed down just because it's so cold down there. And so basically zombies are coming up out of the lake. So we have a lot of threats happening in this book. There's a lot of bad things happening, and one of them is people are coming up out of the lake, and one of them is Tab Daniels.
Yeah. In the chapter called Bloodbath, where she's like confronting undead Tab, and the thing I like about it is like she's thinking about the rules, like we were talking about earlier, and how it just doesn't match up. So she's trying to like recalibrate. This doesn't fit what is supposed to happen. So what's really going on? She thinks she has to kill him with a particular axe, which is part of like the legend of the town and everything. But when she attacks him with it, it doesn't have the effect she's expecting it to. Was it not the axe that brought my dad back? Then what? Why? I mean, revenge. Sure, he hates me for what I did to him and just for existing. But what I did to him first wasn't exactly on purpose. I thought he was Jason. Jason was what I wanted, what I deserved. And second, way more important, what I did to him should be the justice that puts a temporary cap on the cycle of violence. You don't get to get revenge on people just for getting revenge on you, do you?
Yeah. Yes.
So like I love it because it's like a cool line, but it's also like it's her going back to the roots of trying to use the rules of horror movies to navigate a fucking ridiculous situation. Okay. What's the other two? All right.
We need to talk about bears.
We'll talk about bears really quick, but I want to go through these other 2 bullet points. We're going to talk about bears. Anyone, including the main character, can die. This means you, Sid. So I feel like Banner is that person.
Yeah.
I think Banner's that person.
Yeah.
I think, and the funny thing is, like, the way that you two and other people who had read The Angel of Indian Lake before I had a chance to talked about the book having finished it, I was 100% sure Jade was going to die. And I was not ready for that. I was like, I can't. I have to read this, but I can't. And so I'm really glad the way it turned out. But yeah, I was pretty sure that Jade was going to have some noble end or something like that.
Yeah, I was worried. Of course, Stephen himself seeded that idea pretty well, saying it's finally time to say goodbye to Jade Daniels, and that's true because she is not at the end of the story. She's not the final girl. She's the Angel of Indian Lake. She's the only thing that's like more powerful and more necessary than a final girl is the mother of this land is what she becomes, taking over that role from Josie Sack, and I'm sure we'll talk about that more later. But yeah, I was worried that we were going to really see a violent end to her life or some kind of heroic self-sacrifice. But she is gone. She's transformed into something new. So her identity as the final girl is over, and her identity as the angel takes root and starts. That being said, it looks clear from that very last scene we get in the novel that her little niece 80 recognizes her, knows who she is, lets her pick her up. I think she'll probably continue to have her identity, but she is forever changed. And I wondered, is she going to take part in the world as it is anymore, or does she become this mysterious figure who walks on the waters at night? Will she, is she going to show up for dinner at Letha's house, or is she always going to be kind of on the shoreline, and Letha has to come out and talk to her? We don't really get a good picture of that, I don't think, but my sense is that she's transformed into something different. Now, that being said, there is a wonderful moment in the last chapter too, where she keeps a promise she made in Don't Fear the Reaper that I always really hated. She told Christine Gillette she would come, the old lady, Christine, who she interviews as part of a project for book 1 for extra credit. She goes and actually sees her at the beginning of Don't Fear the Reaper and says she'll come back and talk to her, and she or acts like she does. She's not Jade. Christine knows who she is. Christine's an old woman, but she knows who Jade is. But she, Jade doesn't want to speak to her right then, pretends she's someone else, kind of ignores her, and she feels bad about it. And I just hate that. And then she comes back at the very end and visits Christine and says she's going to come back again. And that is one of those wonderful loose threads that gets tied up there. And she's got kind of a grandmother figure in Christine that she's never had before. And that's really a beautiful moment. And Christine's even saying, is it finally over? And Jade says, not quite. Because Jade has not kind of transformed, had her, I don't want to say transfiguration because it's not quite that, but it's close to it. It's definitely a transformation. But I guess she'll be able to go and visit Christine and I would think Letha and 80. But what will that experience be like, and in what form will Jade take? Will she be visible to other people, etc.? So there's a lot of open questions there. But I love that he leaves it as mysterious as he does.
Yeah, what's her name? Christine Gillette.
Yeah,
Christine Gillette.
Yeah, Christine Gillette.
I think I'm getting that right.
That is one of my favorite kinds of characters because they barely show up, they barely interact, but because of and they're positioned as like her character's position is this like senile, demented old woman or whatever it is. But because of what happens in this final book, that she got it the whole time. Like she knew, like she was more keyed in than like anybody would ever give her like the benefit of the doubt of being. And I love characters like that, where it's just like, so that asked the question, like, what has she seen before? Like, what does she know? Why does she know these things? I love those types of characters where it's like, she
was there on the shore when Stacey Graves was kind of pulled up by the jaw when the dude's out there looking for whatever he was looking for, trying to haul up a truck or whatever it was with his winch, and grabbed Stacey Graves by the jaw instead. And Christine was there. She saw it. She's the only person who's kind of from that era who's still alive and remembers it clearly. So you kind of have this. The member of this much older generation who's passing on the story. while no one else may in the real rational world, no one else may believe in things like ghosts and witches and little girls that walk on top of the water, Christine knows. She doesn't have any doubt about it, and she's necessary. We've got to have her. She's a piece of this puzzle to help figure out what's going on, and also I think is part of what helps steer Jade toward finding 80, who's been lost out, not in the woods on the other side of the dam, but actually over where I think over toward Terra Nova, where that strangely shaped tree is. That I think it's where I think Josie Sec, the first angel of Indian Lake, was maybe seen, something like that.
All right, bullet 3. The past will come back to bite you in the ass. Whatever you think you know about the past, forget it. The past is not at rest. Any sins you think were committed in the past are about to break out and destroy you. Absolutely, like the whole tab thing, I think sits well with that.
Yep.
I think that's the big one. That's the obvious one that comes to mind. Tab comes back, the thing that we thought was at rest forever. Although, Jones did a good job with Rexall of teasing. Just that, I think that sometimes in storytelling, just someone wanting something to happen makes it a possibility.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that Rexall was always in service of, was even though Tab is gone and we have no reason to expect he's ever going to come back, someone wants him. And that itself is a little bit dangerous, I'd say.
Rexall's an interesting character especially in Reaper. He's treated with a little bit of more dignity than I was expecting. He's kind of a bit of a clownish figure in some ways. Oh, he's the town lech, he's the town pervert or whatever. But he's also, which is bad, but he's also the guy who's going to get shot with a gun full of buckshot and be, swatting at his skin because he can feel the little pellets burning him. And he's just a big dope, and he's going to end up being put in jail for, for the time being, for his own protection or whatever. No one trusts him, with good reason. But he's not painted. So he's painted as a pretty bad character, but not like a murderous villain. He's not like that kind of prime antagonist material. But in Angel of Indian Lake, he becomes a much more threatening character, and especially when, a small child who we all care about is actually seen being carried away by Rexall. That's really turns the corner on the threat that he actually poses. And he's never, as far as I know, he has never murdered anybody, and yet he's out there in this cabin in the middle of the woods where his whatever grandfather, great grandfather, Remar Lundy. Boy, that's a name, isn't it? And he's out there in this old cabin, and there are children who died long ago who were buried around. He's keeping all that secret. He hasn't exposed the evils of his parents, grandparents, whatever, who did these horrible things, killed these children. He's never brought them, and they're not at rest. And he hears their voices, or hears their scrambling movement of these dead children under the ground. So it takes a very dark turn in his story.
Yeah. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Because there's a moment that we can't not talk about with him. But I want to jump to bears really quick. Because guys, and like we said at the beginning, there's so many things going on. There's a whole plot line in the story that's very crucial that we haven't even brought up yet. And it's the fact that, what's the guy's name who,
it's Seth Mullins.
Mullins.
The game warden, Seth Mullins.
So he was the husband of one of the police, Francine, the policewoman from Don't Fear the Reaper. And they never found the bodies, but they never came back. So they're the two police,
Rexall and Francine,
are found at the beginning of the book, which then makes this dude realize, oh, my wife is dead. There's no chance that
she just ran off on him or something, and she'll come back to him.
I'm gonna find a quote. So this guy basically, in his grief, sets a fire in the forest. And I'm going to find this quote before we go on, because this is just one simple example of how powerful Jones's writing is. This is Jade. Jade at some point knows what's going on, that he finds out his wife is dead. He sets this fire in his like ridiculous grief and all this. And the line is, if I lost somebody like that, maybe I set my house on fire too, and then just sit there, satisfied that what's outside me finally matches what's inside.
That's a whole lot of her story, and I think that's why we see the power that slasher films have in Jade's life, especially My Heart is a Chainsaw, and that's why she's got this bizarre kind of, not a death wish, but she describes it as a prayer. The only time she's ever prayed was that a slasher would actually come to town, come to Proof Rock, and I think make manifest in reality, so everyone in town can see the turmoil that's in her own heart. That's why, that's when there's some filmmaker and actors and a crew who put together Bay of Blood or Nightmare on Elm Street or any of the Giallo and slasher type films, like, somebody gets it. She sees that someone else understands how violent and the turmoil is inside of her own heart.
Yeah.
And so she wanted the slasher cycle to start up. And I think what you just read is just another similar reference to it. Yeah, I'd let the whole place burn down around me. Now what's inside me is made manifest around me, and everyone will understand finally what it's like to be me.
It kind of cues in how empathetic she is too, though, because like she totally gets why this guy did this ridiculous thing. Yeah. But the domino effect of this, so this guy finds out his wife is dead, starts a fire in the forest, and then it starts this crazy forest fire, which creates a situation where the townspeople start arming themselves with like chainsaws and stuff like that, so that
axes,
they can go basically cut down, I'm assuming, a swath of forests to stop the progress of the fire through the forest. Ill-advised as that may be, because there's even a quote in there where it's like when Jade's fighting Tab and they're over there on that side where the fire is happening, and she's like, I have to go over this, and I have to climb over like 10 trees that got cut down, which I'm pretty sure can burn anyway. But
yeah, they're trying to create a fire break. If they can cut down enough trees, maybe even if they're down on the ground or whatever, there's less chance that embers are going to pass from. I actually worked for a state park, and like we did some controlled burns sometimes to just prevent big fires from breaking out. But yeah, the idea is like create enough of a gap where embers being blown from the tops of trees aren't going to travel far to the next tree 5 feet over.
Right.
Like, can we cut
easily.
100 yards or more, and then reduce the amount of burn that's embers that are transmitting over to other trees. That's kind of the thing. And the thing is, the chainsaw brigade, I'm not sure how successful they are with doing this, because they don't seem to get very far before things really go wrong for them. Fortunately, the planes that are dropping fire retardant and then just lake water seem to do the job there. But it's a really dangerous situation for them.
Yeah. So that causes chaos. But if we remember, I'm trying to get to the bears. So if we remember from My Heart is a Chainsaw, the fire happens, and that draws all of the bears are trying to escape, elk are trying to escape, bears trying to escape. It changes the way that the wildlife is behaving and everything. So that's part of why there's these fucking I'm going to let you guys kind of dive into the whole bear thing a little bit more, but bears become a huge like part of how everybody's dying. And that's the kickoff of it, is like this guy starting this fire and bringing everybody over to this side. But also
Thus the bear claws on the cover there.
Yep. Yeah. For anybody, who didn't put that together. I didn't until I was reading all the bear shit, and I was like, oh my God. So there's the fire thing, but there's also at some point someone invites everybody to see a movie that's going to be projected onto the dam. And so like the townspeople who aren't over there trying to fight the fire, or maybe even some of them, but also the other townspeople, they're all converging in this one spot so they can do this like viewing of this movie. And is it on the anniversary? Is it actually like July 4th again, or?
No, it's Halloween night.
Halloween night. Yeah.
And it's Lana Singleton and her son Lemmy on the yacht. They've rigged up this big projector system, and they're going to show it on the back side of the dam, or I guess the front side, the dry side of the dam. And while the proof rockers basically fled, those who didn't go across the lake to help get some quick cash by cutting down trees to help create a fire break. The rest of the proof rockers mostly fled town, get out before the fire possibly crosses, goes around the lake or crosses the lake. But as the fire is being put out, I think mostly by the jet firefighters, big airplane firefighters, the proof rockers start coming back. She sees their cars lining back up on the highway coming back into town, and a big movie viewing that's been arranged by the Singletons or Singletarys, I forget which it is drawing everyone out to that dry side of the dam in this little lower area around a creek. So everyone's gathered around there, and meanwhile there's this one of the many threats going on is somebody's running around in a black robe, like a Father Death robe from Ghostface kind of robe. And wherever this person goes, there's this sweet smell of like frosting going around as well. And so it turns out, of course, that's Seth Mullins, and he's using bear bait, a kind of sweet frosting kind of substance to bait bears and bring them in. He's going to bring bears into down into where everyone's watching the movie. The guy's completely lost his marbles. And there's an odd moment there. So bears come in. I'll just leave it there. I don't know if either of you guys want to take on the trying to describe the carnage that happens there. But it is a traumatic scene, completely chaotic.
Oh, I think that's best read off the page. Yeah, I mean, otherwise you're just gonna walk away like covered in blood, like Carrie or something. But bears are like one of the things that tie all the three books together too. Which, I mean, granted, yes, we're in Idaho, we're in and around a national forest. Of course, there's bears, but they're always there, and they're always killing someone.
Yeah. Yep.
I there's one quote from this. So like, it is not a bear. It is bears. There are several bears. There's a baby bear, and there's several other bears that are drawn to the smell of this thing.
I think it's 5 or 6, like
it's
adult bears, and then a couple of small ones.
And so, they just start attacking people, and it's just carnage. The quote that I have from that is, Letha screams, "I guess I'm still screaming. A horse is lying on its side screaming. Everyone else is screaming." So like it just shows you that these bears are lured there, and they just cut through these people like crazy.
Yeah, the bears are like about to fight. Like one bear takes a human down, another bear comes up, and the first bear is like, no, this person, this is my meal. Go find your own meal. Yeah. And I mean, and like one of the bears grabs a little girl and is shaking her around by the arm, and fortunately, like Letha is able to get the bear out of the little child out of the bear's jaws, and they're able to. We assume that the girl ends up being okay, but it's really quite a brutal scene. And then Seth Mullins comes back in with his bag of frosting, and he's looking around at everything he's done. And something kind of snaps him back to reality, and he regrets what he's done or something. But he takes off his his poncho, removes his shirt, slathers the frosting on his body, and starts drawing the bears out after him, and he runs, head into the woods. And that's the only reason why, more people don't die in this scene. It's a pretty traumatic moment there. And that's not the end of the scene. After the bears are gone, Cinnamon Baker shows up. And first little Jan Jansen comes kind of crawling, creepy kid J horror, or he calls it I horror, Idaho horror, starts creeping like down the face of the dam, I believe, down. And then he starts like walking around. He's ready to start pulling people's heads off. When he gets to his own mom, his mom's like, my boy who has been missing for days, if not weeks. I think it's been maybe a couple weeks. And she's like, my boy's back. He doesn't look normal. Okay. He looks like kind of J horrored out, but the mom ends up, running to him, babe, Jan, you're alive. And Jan halfway tears her head off. And then Deputy Joe Ellen puts a couple of bullets in Jan's head. So again, like real, quite a serious moment there. And Joe Ellen's completely shaken. She's never actually had to fire. It looks like Jade thinks she's never actually had to fire her service revolver ever before. And certainly not at a child. So Joe Ellen's kind of out of commission for a little while. And that's when Cinnamon Baker shows up and we start seeing she's actually been here, living in the yacht. We find out, at least for a week or two, but she's here trying to. We thought she'd be out of commission in a facility or something, but she's back here trying to pull the strings to create more chaos and get revenge on this horrible little town that her parents brought her to, that have left her bereft of her parents, bereft of her sister Ginger, and have just kind of ruined her perfect little life.
All right, so Cinnamon came up, and Cinnamon has been, obviously like a big part of Don't Fear the Reaper, and now this book. She was the whole time. Cinnamon's a big character, and that makes me think of something that I definitely think we need to talk about, and we got to start wrapping things up soon. So we're going to try and be a little bit brief about this, but one of the elements of this book is Jade seeing a therapist. I mentioned it earlier. So Jade is going regularly and seeing a therapist, but in true Jade style, it's not like I'm sitting on a couch. It's not like what you would see in like The Sopranos or wherever, where they're sitting in this pretty room and talking and stuff. The only way that she feels comfortable doing it is being in a specific location, and they're wearing masks and talking in that way. And so there's kind of, it feels safer or anonymous or something. It's something about that's the only way that she feels safe and comfortable doing this. Is I think they're on swing sets, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And they're wearing I think it's the ghost face mask, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think it's the scary movie version of the ghost face mask, I think, with the long tongue sticking out. So
she's got a therapist named Sharona, and she's going to this therapist and kind of just talking through. So Greg, you mentioned earlier that throughout the book, she's talking to different people. I know there's a couple of times where like her first person narrative is speaking to her therapist, like, see, I can do this or whatever, like that kind of thing. So she's going to therapy and she's like trying to work on getting through all this stuff that's going on. And it's revealed later in the book that it's been Cinnamon, at least for part of the,
I think only for the last session or two. Jade makes some reference saying, reference to her voice being kind of messed up, like she's got a bad cold.
Yep.
Well, no, like Cinnamon took I think an axe handle or something to the throat, and has left her vocally completely damaged. So while she's able to disguise herself in the mask, even having a cane maybe buried under the gravel underneath the swing set, her voice still is really rough. And she was saying, that she'd gotten a cold and that's why she sounds so bad. nope. It's a little bit of a clue there that this is not the person Jade thinks it is. It's not Sharona Watts. It's Cinnamon in disguise is her. Yeah.
So, and really, now that I'm thinking about it, the thing that I really want to dig into, the therapist stuff is cool, but like the Baker investigations, so like the interstitial kind of things throughout, instead of it being Jade's horror history or the
Slasher 101 kind of stuff.
Yeah. In this book, it is a series of reports of people observing Jade and reporting back to someone who I have my theory of who it is. I don't think we all agree on that. But like basically there's these reports kind of stitched in throughout the book of what Jade's doing, who she's talking to. Like at some points, like there's like her communications and stuff like that. And I can't believe we're not even going to be able to have time to talk about Lemmy. And one of like the most like fucking just destructive moments for me in this whole book from like an emotional perspective is in one of these reports, they obtain and include a full email that Jade wrote to the original email address for her history teacher who had died, Mr. Holmes. And
another bear.
Yeah.
That's right. Bear. Grady Bear Holmes. Yes.
And that letter, that email, I didn't get through it in one read. Like I would stop and I would cry and I would go back and I would read more and I would stop and I would cry. And it was just so fucking heartbreaking because she's writing to this person and she's like, it's the most honest and open I think we've seen the character in the entire book. And vulnerable and just like, she's like a little kid. But yeah. and like you could see how much she loves this guy. And at one point she just writes repeatedly, I miss you. Like, I miss you, I miss you, I miss you. And man, I lost it. I was like, I think I texted Jesse like, or something. I felt so like, it was so heavy. This email that she sent to basically her father figure. And like the tragic thing is he's never going to see it unless we believe in some sort of supernatural way, which in these books, you know, maybe, but man, that particular, but like, I think that the Baker reports did a lot to kind of help us see where Jade was at as a person and stuff. But fuck, man, that email just totally destroyed me. I hope it killed you guys too, because it just totally destroyed me.
I mean, it's a, you can tell the language is really obvious. It's not like, it reads fairly chaotically. And she's on pretty heavy medication, apparently following another suicide attempt on, I think it was, like July 3rd or something like that. And she was rescued by Letha and Lana. And I think she's again in a very bad place. I mean, it's coming up on the 8th anniversary of the, Indian Lake, Independence Day massacre / Lake Witch massacre, as Jade would call it. And, but she also mentions in this email that she learned at the dam, she learned that she can do something she never thought she could do in 100 years. And it's just left very mysterious there. And there are hints like that throughout these Baker report. This is Baker Solutions, an investigation going on. They're surveilling Jade. We don't know who they're reporting this ultimately to. But at least I don't think it's ever the recipient of these reports is ever really specified in the reports themselves. But she has that hint about she did something at the dam she never thought she could do in 100 years. Earlier Baker reports are saying things about how they think that she's the one who's going over and sawing off the sign that reads Deacon Point. Well, it would make sense that Jade would be the one doing that because that's Camp Blood, and she doesn't want Samuel Deacon's name. It's also where Samuel Deacons was killed by a bear back in My House with a Chainsaw. Bears again, and she doesn't want the names of the founders. What an arrogant thing to come in here as these just very wealthy people coming to this town that they didn't leave and call themselves the founders. Okay, they founded Terra Nova, New Earth, like the New World. Again, like using the colonizer language there. But she's going to cut that sign down. But the Baker report investigators are really struggling to figure out if it is Jade, how is she getting there? Because like walking around all the way around the lake would take such a long time, and surely she would have been seen on some of these security cameras, or maybe she's taking a boat or a kayak or something across, but we don't have any. We can't find any boats over there that she would have taken or any evidence of that. In fact, all we really see are the bare footprints in the mud there. So how's she? If it's Jade, how's she?
You just made that connection for me right now, which I didn't get until this point. That she was just walking on the water. She's walking on the water.
Yeah. That's what happened, I think, at the dam when she went there over there to with Hardy and holding Melanie, kind of the sort of material ghost of Melanie, who she pulled in this wild scene at the end of Reaper that came out of the white elk, the spirit elk. She's carrying Melanie over there to put her back in and into the water. Hardy goes over and drops down the water with her, but Jade is able to actually walk.
Jade can't.
Yep. So so who is the Angel of Indian Lake? We're getting hints all along the way. It's Jade, and you have this idea of someone walking on the Lake Witch or whatever walking on the water. Jade is becoming that person, in part because of this ability apparently to walk on water.
Guys, there's so much more. There's so much more. There's like about 30 quotes that I have that I would love to share. We didn't even talk about the fact that Jade met someone very special in prison who's like very important to her, which I think is one of my favorite parts, is that like in this book, I'm going to have a wrap up.
We're going to have to do an anniversary revisit of this, I think.
Oh my God.
Because someday it's going to come out in a collected tome. So it'll just all be in one place.
Yeah.
And then
that'll be the time. Yeah, we'll do it. Yeah. But for now, to respect everybody's time, we're going to start wrapping up with our general thoughts, and maybe I'll work some quotes into my wrap up. But I'm going to say, let's have Jesse do his wrap up first, like final thoughts on the Angel of Indian Lake or the whole trilogy, whatever you want to kind of like leave your final thoughts as.
It's really rare to get a trilogy like this. I feel like something that is this big and more so this impactful, that just not only connects with people, but resonates with them on a deep, booming inner level. And we don't see that all that often. And they really are fantastic books. Jade Daniels is my final girl. She's one of the best. Although now, Jade Daniels is my angel. So,
yep.
But anyway, they're just really standout books. They are all three together are singular. It's something really special, and more than anything, I hope as many people as possible can discover this and experience these stories. And I hope those who maybe need something like this, in their life, find it, and that everyone else realizes, like Jade finally did, that the final girl is not the gem rarity in the world. Everyone's got it in them. So I hope everyone can feel something akin to that and, connect with it inside, and whatever it does for them, it's a positive thing. So I really hope people find these books and connect with Jade and the story, and then keep on picking up Stephen's books and more other books too. Just never leave the shelf, just keep pulling them off and reading them.
Keep reading. Yep. Keep reading. Great.
Awesome.
Great points.
Perfect, Jesse. Thank you so much. Jesse has to move on to other stuff in his evening, so he's not going to be with us for the wrap ups that me and Greg do. So, Jesse, thank you much.
Just know that nothing Rob and I are going to say is going to be better than what you just said. So, well done, sir.
That's not true.
I should only speak for myself. But,
and I like the idea of doing a anniversary revisit or like an omnibus release revisit or something like that, because like there's never going to not be something to talk about with these books. So
or when the TV series comes out, which is surely like Netflix or Amazon original or something's going to pick up this IP and do a TV series. That's what I don't have any special knowledge of that, but that's my guess as to what would happen.
We need screeners, right? So then it could be a screening party, ARC party.
Yeah.
There we go. Nice. Oh yeah. All right, Jesse, thank you so much. You are a very, very valued voice in this conversation, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Absolutely. You too. It was a blast.
Okay. All right, Jesse had to drop off, but me and Greg are going to go through and do some final wrap-ups, and I just want to acknowledge really quick, we could easily talk about this for another hour and a half, and I know that if you've read this book, you're like, why didn't they talk about these 10 things? Because we could easily talk about this for a whole day, probably multiple days. And so these are the things that, first of all, occur to us now, but also, second of all, are important to us. And so, not a perfect conversation, but I like this format. So, with that said, Greg, why don't you go ahead and hit us with what your final thoughts on The Angel of Indian Lake or the whole trilogy, whatever.
Sure. Yeah. I'll just sticking with Angel of Indian Lake. There's a couple of other things I'd bring out. One is that we have two, when you think about like, why are all of these bad things happening? There are multiple threats coming together, converging on Jade and her friends and Indian Lake in general, the folks of Proof Rock, all at the same time. And what's going on? And and I think Letha and Jade, Banner while he's still alive, Jocelyn Cates, who's like this kind of final girl from a previous generation, they're all trying to use their understanding, their knowledge of the slasher cycle, and to figure out what is behind this. Why did they make a real point to say this golden pickaxe. This was the pickaxe that kind of that was created by Henderson and Mr. Henderson and Mr. Golding, generations back, that symbolized the mining for gold, the gold operations that are the mining operations that made this a modern American settlement, trying to come here to get rich, strike it rich. Prospectors come in, and it becomes a whole mining town operation. What is it about that golden pickaxe? And by the way, like Henderson, I think murdered Golding or vice versa, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you've got this pursuit of wealth that becomes murderous at the end, but you got this golden pickaxe that's been lost, and it's been like float down there in the waters of Indian Lake for a long time. Tab Daniels comes up with the original golden pickaxe, gold coated pickaxe with the new and has added some new handle to it, and that looks like his main weapon. He's going on killing people with this as he's come out of the water. Why is that golden pickaxe so important? And Tab gets separated from it at one point. He actually slings the pickaxe and goes end over end and thunks into a tree. Jade thinks that the golden pickaxe is this evil, supernatural, magical item that's letting Tab become reanimated and get up out of the lake, but then he's separated from it. So is it, is that really kind of what's behind all of this? And they're really kind of struggling to figure out, like, is that his magical item or not? And anyway, it turns out that it's really not the main thing that's behind all this. But I do think the main evil force that's powering all of this. I do think, though, that the gold pickaxe is an important symbol of, the evils of the pursuit of wealth, and it's a colonization, kind of the colonial sort of symbol. So that's one of the main two symbols there. But then ultimately, they find it's not really the golden pickaxe that's powering all of this. It is the evil of the church down in Drowntown, where Ezekiel and the cult of Ezekiel have some sort of sustained life after all this time. And while Jade has some very sharp points, says some very sharp things, criticizing the Christianity or the church, is calling it evil. I think you could go maybe even just a little bit beyond that and say, really, it's the pursuit of power over others that Ezekiel and the church in Drowntown really represent. He is this bizarre kind of cult figure, and that extends out to the founders as well. They throw their weight around, they throw their money around. Letha, she kind of owns the town. She's a very good person, but she knows what her wealth can do. She has the whole town in her pocket, and she uses it to try to help Jade just simply get a job after she gets out of her second stint in prison. But I think the church in Drowntown and the cult that Ezekiel built up there is another important symbol of evil, a symbol of the pursuit of power, and that's the evil that ultimately is powering all of this stuff, all these bad things that are going on here in Proof Rock. And then the last thing I would say is just the question that we get from the very front cover of the book is really, who is the angel of Indian Lake? It turns out the apparition that's been appearing is Josie Seck, who was the mother of Stacey Graves. There have been stories we've heard about over the previous couple of books, children being told stories about for generations, the mother of Stacey Graves is still out there looking for her little girl. Don't go out at night, kids, stay at home, because her mother, Josie Seck, might snatch you up, take you away. And Josie was the victim of murder by her husband. And then her daughter suffered as essentially an orphan. Her father packed up and left the girl there at the old cabin. So anyway, Josie is this angel of Indian Lake figure. But then as Jade transforms from being the final girl, Jade thinks she's passed off that final girl role to Letha, and then they thought in Don't Fear the Reaper, Letha and Jade both thought, well, it must be Cinnamon Baker, the next young, good girl in town. And it turns out Cinnamon was actually pretty villainous and monstrous and warped herself. And so now, Letha is telling Jade, I can't be the final girl now. I'm a mom. She has essentially transcended the role of the final girl. And I think that's part of the theme of this book is, we know the final girl is very powerful, and there's only one thing more powerful than the final girl, and that's a mother. And Jade, in taking on the very, very, she I think in her internal monologue that we get toward the end of the novel, she has some very strong things to say about her devotion to Adrian, Letha and Banner's little girl, and we see the mothering figure that she's becoming. She is able to, by basically dropping this scientific floating laboratory down on the church. I don't know if that's a comment of science destroying religion or something like that. I don't know if that's implied there. But by dropping this scientific island on the church, it releases Stacey Graves, and Stacey's able to come out of the lake. And then Jade looks around her, behind her, and there's Josie Seck, the first, or at least the prior angel of Indian Lake is there. And in finding that place in the bringing that child, that orphan child, back together with her mom, we see that that Jade is becoming this kind of mother figure herself. And I think that's the completion of her cycle of transcending being the final girl to becoming the angel, the mother. And, Stephen has said things about his own mother, and like one of the most compelling images and memories of his own mom is as they're going to yet another high school. Like, he went to so many different schools when his mom was a single mom, and she would go and, move to another town, and Stephen or one of his brothers would get in trouble with, that school, and his mom would come in there. She would fly into that school, into that parent-teacher meeting or that meeting with the principal, and it didn't matter if one of her sons had done something wrong or not. She was there to stand up for her son, for her kids. And I think that left a real, that left its mark on Stephen in creating like his image of what a mother was all about. And we see that in Jade. So I think that's why she's able to become the angel, not just because there's a little hint in there at the very end. that she's able to walk on water because Stacey Graves in Chainsaw almost bit her fingers off, and some of that lake water that had been in some way supernaturally charged up by the Church of Drowntown and that unholy choir singing, she's now able to walk on the water. But also, I really think it's because she becomes such a maternal figure in her way without her having children herself. She sees how important that is. And she's willing to, storm the gates of hell to protect 80. I think that's this ultimate transformation we get here. That's most important.
Fantastic. And I love the concept of the way that motherhood is thought of and depicted from the beginning of the trilogy to the end of it, kind of evolving, and or at least maybe Jade's thoughts about it or Jade's experience with it or something like that.
Her experience is it's a real mixed bag. Mostly it's negative. Her own mother moves out when she's a child and leaves her with Tab, who's a terrible person. And her mom moves out. She can't take any more of Tab's BS, any more of his terrible behavior or whatever. So she leaves her own daughter, and she's living with regret for years and years, soldiering on like those soldiers in front of the Birmingham Palace or whatever, who just are imperturbable. And she's trying to do that herself, but she just knows she abandoned her girl, and that's part of Jade's image of motherhood as well. And then she sees Letha, who loves her little girl, or she sees Josie Sek, that angel, the original angel, who just wants to be reunited with her daughter. And Jade heads that direction of caring for children. And all of us, of course, we look at this and say, how can we have a little girl left an orphan eating out of people's trash cans, 100 years ago or 60 years ago or whatever it was. We all have that same kind of empathetic response that Jade has.
Well, and then kind of a final thought on motherhood, which there was no way we were going to get through this without talking about, is at one point in the book, Letha is convinced that Rexall has killed her daughter.
Yes.
And
we see two of little
Nothing,
80s shoes out in the woods.
I don't know if I've ever seen a more powerful depiction of what a mother will do to the person that hurt their kid than the absolute. The first word that came to mind was deconstruction, but obliteration.
She demolishes his head.
She completely removed him from existence, basically, because of what she thinks he did. And so that depiction of motherhood is like, it harkens back to the bear at the end of My Heart is a Chainsaw.
Yep.
The
not
ferocity
with claws, but with the fireman's Halligan tool, which I looked up, and it's a pretty serious tool there. It's for prying doors open, cutting through. It's got an axe part and like a crowbar part to it. It looks, and from the description, sounds quite weighty. And she takes that thing and Rexall does not last long at all. She puts that thing through his skull and then proceeds to just kind of blunt force puree his skull.
But then afterwards, it's worth noting that she owns up to the crime and doesn't want, and it is interesting. The reason that she does it is because she doesn't want to get away with something that would leave the door open for future revenge. So she's like protecting the community from another cycle of a slasher by taking responsibility for her actions. And I thought that I never would have thought of that. So kudos to Jones for putting that as part of it. And B, that's final girl behavior.
Totally. And it really is like they bring up the Freddy Krueger scenario, like the parents generation took the law into their own hands and I think set fire to the barn that he was in and killed him. And old Freddy Krueger, because they believed that he had been murdering or molesting children or whatever. They go to, and he comes back. This system, this kind of universal cycle of justice comes back around. You took the law into your own hands and you killed someone. You shouldn't have done that. She does not want that to happen to Prufrock. She's trying her best to end the slasher cycle, and she'll even do it by, she makes the deputy who was going to delete the video that she took of her doing this. She was going to make the deputy was going to delete it, or they're going to destroy the phone and get rid of the record. And she's like, no, you go and post it to social media now to make sure that I can't get away with doing this. Now, honestly, I do think she could stand a good chance in court under temporary insanity or something like that. But Jade kind of says like she's got a good, she'll be able to afford good lawyers. She'll be fine ultimately, but no, she's not going to let the slasher cycle go on. And that's an interesting take, and it shows how seriously they take the whole idea of the slasher rules being real. They may be grown-ups now, they have children of their own, but they take the idea of the slasher cycle as seen in these movies real seriously, and they use the rules and the scenarios and the realities that are described in fiction. For them, fiction, they take them seriously enough that they're trying to figure out, why are these things happening? What's the cause of them? And with the strange slasher logic, Jade is actually able to figure out where, what is behind all this. And it's that it's Ezekiel and the church down in Drowntown that's the source of all this evil.
And that's going to be where I pick up my wrap up by kind of the first thing I want to acknowledge about this whole trilogy is that in each of the books, Jade takes down this is tricky because Jade takes down in the first book, Stacey Graves, who is the main killer. In the second book, she takes down Dark Mill South, who of all of the bad people, because we know Cinnamon Baker did her Cinnamon Baker thing, but Dark Mill South is the biggest, most evil presence in the book. So Jade takes down Dark Mill South. And in this one, she takes down Ezekiel. And she's the only one that figures out that he's the reason that all of this has been happening. And so when she destroys the church, all the church people kind of clamor up onto land. And Jade knows, I got to get rid of this Ezekiel guy. And she does. And it's only at that point that it's kind of truly over. And so the girl who always said she wasn't the final girl always did the most important work. And I think that the reason that she was able to be that person is because she wouldn't stop. Like, she wouldn't give in. She'd never let go. And she was willing to go to whatever length it was necessary. Like, she was planning to drown herself to make sure that Stacey Graves didn't come back and kill more people. She was just ready to give everything to try and stop these bad things. And so I think that that's why Jade is the final girl. That's why ultimately, she becomes the Angel of Indian Lake. But that's why she matters so much to everybody. So throughout the trilogy, Jade gives everything all the time without hesitation. And I think that that's very important.
Yep. She absorbs ridiculous amounts of physical punishment. She's like so injured and wounded in this, in the Angel in particular, Angel Indian Lake. I mean, ridiculous amounts of damage she takes. But she also, as the final girl, she's also within the Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street mode. She uses her mind. She's trying to piece together why this is happening, what's giving power to this person who's haunting their dreams, and etc. She's trying to figure out this sort of cosmic justice principle and cycle that's going on. So she's both the final girl in her unwillingness to let things in, her doggedness as well as in her diligence, I guess.
Yep. Yeah. So there's a quote I need to acknowledge from, I think it's from one of the Baker reports that happened throughout the book. But because like one of the themes that happened throughout was they were looking at when Jade was kind of like at low points and either, drunk or, kind of messed up because her medication was out of whack or whatever it was. And she was trying to reach out to people, even if it didn't make sense, like her dead history teacher. And one of the communications that goes out starts, I think, with the line, "The lake doesn't want me." And that's how she starts to explain her like second suicide attempt.
Yeah.
And like that's fucking heartbreaking. Like
Yes.
that really, so that line, "The lake doesn't want me," really just kind of haunts me having read this. And only now am I really realizing, thanks to your insight, Greg, that there's a reason that trying to drown yourself doesn't work if you're Jade and you're on Indian Lake. So
it hit me when Jocelyn Cates there is trying to talk her into swimming across the lake to get back to Proof Rock as fast as they can and get away from the killers and stuff going on. And she's like, and Jade keeps resisting. She doesn't want it. Well, they could walk around. That's going to take like hours. Well, we could stay here. Shouldn't we stay here to help with the rest of this chainsaw brigade survivors? Well, yeah, I guess so. But you should go swim and get out of here. And she keeps saying she's giving all these excuses for not trying. And finally, Jocelyn Cates says, I know you can swim. I taught you when you were a little kid. Jocelyn was like the town swim coach and had been an Olympic contender in swimming at one point. And and then I'm like, she can't get she won't swim because she can't swim. She can't get down in the water. That's why she's trying to get out of swimming across there with Jocelyn. There's a moment where it says like, maybe if it were dark, she would head in that direction. She would do it in the dark because she can walk across. And then I went back to saying, that's why in these Baker investigation reports early on, they keep talking about the Deacon Point sign and how is someone getting over there? We don't see boats or whatever. It's like, oh my gosh. From the beginning, he's seeding in the idea that she's walking across the lake. She's already undergoing this transformation.
Yeah. That's so cool. That is so cool.
There's the one quote. Can I give one quote that just really impressed me? And it's real short. It's 4 words. But this is toward the end, the chapter, The New Blood, like the last chapter. Here's Jade, and she's kind of looking at the damage that she's taking, looking at her arm. She's got a Frankenstein arm now, but the stitches will heal. She doesn't care about the scars, and she says, "Scars prove you lived." I just thought that's a really good way to put it. Scars prove you lived. And as a parent, I remember thinking, like my carrying 3 kids around, like sometimes all at the same time, my knees, my back, especially when they were little, man, I was not in great shape. I would be climbing up the stairs sometimes thinking, I don't know if I can do this. My knees hurt so bad. And I thought, man, I'd hate to get to 60 and 70 and not have any wear and tear on my body that showed I was involved with my kids. Not exactly the extreme kind of damage that Jade is taking here, but boy, those 4 words really echoed with me. Scars prove you lived. And Jade can accept that about the shape she's in here at the end of this 3rd book in the trilogy.
Yeah. Man, I almost don't want to ruin that with the quote that I want to get in, because I think it's kind of badass. And this is like Jones always has this, like, he's got a spectrum of like things he can make you feel. And sometimes it's like, that was just really metal. And the line is, "In the rock, paper, scissors of horror, chainsaw always wins."
Love it. Yes.
Oh, it's so good.
That's awesome.
All right. So, but to kind of like pull my wrap up back together, I think that in this book, it went from, I think in the first 2 it was an examination of parenthood a lot, and I think that parenthood theme is definitely present here, but it's more of a family theme. Mm-hmm. And I think it's like more of just recognizing how important it is to care about the people that matter in your life, however they kind of manifest, whether it's like your best friend and their spouse and kid or whatever it is. But then also like having the presence of mind to respect the other people, because none of this would have happened without, Stacey Graves being separated from her mom. Like none of this, well, maybe because of the church and blah, 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 whatever, maybe something else would have happened, but like it all started there and just got worse and worse. And it's because people neglected other people. People tore families apart. They did thoughtless, selfish things. And it comes back around to me of just like, yeah, parenthood is a very big theme in this, but just community and like caring about the people in our lives is kind of a lesson too. So,
there's a sisterhood. You see a real sorority, a kind of a sororial spirit between Jade and Letha. Jocelyn Cates, the like prior generation's final girl, is how she's described. Addie, the next generation. Christine Gillette, like two or more generations, maybe 3 generations back now. You had this kind of sorority, this sisterhood going on. That's the family right there. And sadly, we lose Banner, and it's a tragic moment there. Joe Ellen, Deputy Joe Ellen, is a strong female figure here. Of course, there are some pretty terrible women in here, Cinnamon Baker in particular. Even Lana Singletary, the wealthy, like the most prominent of the original founders, who's in this story. She's not all on Jade's side, but she sacrifices her yacht and and Treasure Island. She gives control of hands the wheel over to Jade and lets her destroy the island to end this cycle that Lana does not understand, but she trusts Jade enough. She can see that Jade knows something's going on, and Jade is at the center of this. So even she has really some pretty strong redeeming moments there. I don't know if this is intentional or not, but when we think about the male characters in the story, the most noble of them, Banner, is kind of a bit of a dope, but he's a good guy. And Jade, the strongest thing she says about him is that he is a good dad. Letha made the right decision marrying him. He's a good dad. I don't know that you can say anything better about a guy than he's a good dad. But the other most noble men are Hardy and Holmes, and they're gone. Yeah. Like, where's the strength of the male characters here? It's definitely, I don't know that it's a dire picture for the virtue of men in Proof Rock at this point, but it's definitely the strength of women that are carrying through. Again, that's why I think like the sorority, the sororial strength in the story, it's around a band of women who take up for each other. And again, this image of Jade in the very last chapter going and sitting there with Christine Gillette, and that kind of grandmotherly wisdom and truth that she's getting from old Christine. It's a beautiful image there.
Yep. I'm going to, one thing I wanted to acknowledge to bring it back around to Jade Daniels is my final girl, is that I think another thing, because I talked about how she took down the biggest people in each story. She also was the one that figured it all out, like she cared enough to like pick through all of the chaos that was going on and figure out what was happening. And so like, I think Stephen did a great job of creating a character who, like Jesse was saying, kind of the message is that all of us can be a final girl. He did a great job of creating that character, but then he also did a great job of showing you what types of characteristics you need to have in order to be that type of person. Like she's got crazy loyalty. She never backs down. She's, endlessly like inquisitive. Like there's a lot of things that like characteristics that he put on display that are the things that made her what she was. So I thought that was really cool. That
she questions authority, and she questions the prevailing, the predominant narrative of the community. I think those are really important there. And she knows her slashers. So kids, study your slasher movies, because if you don't, you're very vulnerable. That's the only way she can figure this. If she didn't know slashers, then she wouldn't be able to. She wouldn't be alive by the end of the first story.
And she's very egoless. There's a lot I'm sure that there's going to be like people who do papers in college on Jade as a character and what it means and all that. But I think that Stephen did a remarkable thing by creating this trilogy. It's an amazing accomplishment, and I can't really think of anything that's like it. So if anybody's got any ideas of something that's similar, but this is so unique and so powerful and beyond all like the wishy-washy, like higher level stuff, just rock star horror, like, and this book really ramped it up too. So all around, it's just such a fantastic experience.
Yeah. It's rare when you see a character, not even like a book, like a popular book, but a character kind of catch the zeitgeist and gain the loyalty and the devotion of so many readers who really feel like they relate to her, and they're emotionally invested in the stories. I think that is quite an accomplishment. And I can just tell you, as someone who kind of follows along with this community and sends shirts to people, like, people love this character, and they're eager for the next thing that Stephen's going to write. So we're already seeing, people popping up, pictures of I was a teenage slasher, and they're excited, especially like the folks who are like, go out and get on lists to get these advanced review copies, these ARCs, the ARC party type folks. Man, they are eager for the next thing he writes. So it's a great time to be a horror fan. It's a great time, especially to be a Stephen Graham Jones reader.
Yep. I'm going to wrap it up at that point. Like I said, we could continue this. I think that I really like Jesse's idea of doing like a anniversary conversation or something like that. So maybe we'll do that down the line. Greg, thank you so much. Your knowledge, your ability to kind of like put things out there and stitch things together and draw these conclusions that really gave insight, I think is fantastic. So I really appreciate you and your contribution to these conversations.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, absolutely.
6.5 hours, I think, probably, when we're done.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thanks to you and Jesse for letting me join you guys. This has been a blast, and just having a kind of a venue like this to talk about the stories is giving me good reason to go back and reread and focus and just taking notes on the stories as I go through them. And so I can really try to pick out some of the themes, and I'm just like reading through Angel of Indian Lake a second time, I'm picking up on so much I didn't before. And you just got to, especially with this wily Stephen Graham Jones, you got to look at that language that he's using, look at the phrases. Why is he bringing up certain things? Why do I, stuff that doesn't appear to be like driving the narrative forward necessarily? No, like, there's reasons it's in there, because he is a superb writer. I see more and more people saying he's one of the greatest writers working today, not within genre fiction, within literature in general. I see more and more voices, people that I respect, saying that kind of thing about him. So he's got to pay attention to, for sure.